Hey there, welcome back. This is an original story from Hidden Revenge Family, and it took a turn you truly didn't see coming. Let's get into it.
Cold rain soaked through my jacket the second the sliding doors of the airport opened. It was a little past 2 in the morning, the kind of hour when the airport feels half asleep and half haunted. Cleaning machines hummed somewhere down the terminal, and the last few passengers dragged their suitcases across the polished floor like ghosts who had missed their flights. I stood under the narrow metal awning outside the arrivals gate and checked my phone again. No new messages. Sloane had promised she would pick me up. 6 months away on deployment, and the first familiar face I was supposed to see back home was my sister. That had been the plan. I called her. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up. But instead of her voice, the first thing I heard was bass. Loud, heavy bass vibrating through the speaker like someone had shoved my phone into a nightclub speaker. Then came laughter, not mine. "Hello," I said. More music. Glasses clinking. Someone yelling over the DJ. Finally, Sloane's voice floated through, slightly slurred and very annoyed. "Why are you calling this late?" I blinked at the rain falling in sheets across the airport pickup lane. "It's 2 in the morning," I said. "You said you'd pick me up." There was a pause. Then she laughed. "Not the warm kind. The kind that tells you the joke is about you." "Oh, right," she said. "The airport thing." Behind her, someone shouted something about champagne. "I'm at a VIP lounge with Julian and his partners," she continued casually. "We're entertaining investors tonight." I wiped rain from my forehead. "You're at a club networking," she corrected. The bass thumped harder through the speaker. I imagined her sitting under purple lights wearing something expensive, pretending she understood whatever tech company Julian was pitching this week. "I just landed," I said. "You promised." Another pause. Then her voice turned sharp. "Look, Avery, I can't just leave a table full of investors because you forgot how to call a taxi. I'm outside in the rain." "Well," she said lightly, "there are buses." I didn't answer. She sighed dramatically like I was the difficult one. "Honestly, you should be used to this by now," she continued. "Isn't your job basically sitting behind a desk filing paperwork for soldiers?" I said nothing. "Grab a bus. Or a cheap motel if you're tired. You've always been good at roughing it." Someone nearby shouted her name. "Hold on," she told me. I heard her talking to someone off the phone. "Sorry, my little sister just landed." "Yeah, the one in the military admin job." More laughter. Then she came back. "Anyway," she said, voice dripping with fake patience, "you'll survive. You always do." Click. The line went dead. Rain kept falling. Cars pulled up, picked up passengers, and disappeared into the dark highway outside the airport. I stood there for a moment with the phone still in my hand. 6 months overseas. 6 months of classified operations sandstorms and 12-hour shifts, and my welcome home was a bus schedule. I didn't feel angry. That might surprise people. But when someone disappoints you enough times, your brain eventually stops wasting energy on reactions. You just take notes. I slid the phone back into my pocket. Then I reached into the inner compartment of my travel bag and pulled out a second phone. It looked older, bulkier, satellite phone. I turned it on. The screen flickered to life. Signal locked instantly. I typed a 12-character authorization code, not quickly, not dramatically, just the way you enter a password you've used 100 times before. The message window opened. Requesting extraction, location verified. I hit send. The phone buzzed once, confirmed. ETA 6 minutes. I slipped the satellite phone back into the bag. Across the street, a shuttle bus pulled into the pickup lane. A tired driver leaned out and yelled, "Downtown route." I shook my head. "Maybe next time." He shrugged and drove away. The rain kept falling. Meanwhile, about 15 miles away, Sloane was having the time of her life. I knew because 5 minutes later my regular phone buzzed. A notification. Sloane was live streaming. Curiosity made me tap it. The video opened to flashing lights, loud music, and a crowd of people who looked like they had never seen a bill they couldn't expense. Sloane stood in the center of it all, holding a glass of champagne and smiling at the camera. Her makeup was perfect. Her hair looked like it had been styled by someone who charged $400 an hour. "Best night ever," she told the camera. The comments rolled past. People complimenting her dress, asking about the wedding. Someone asked where Julian was. She turned the camera. Julian stood next to her in a tailored suit, one arm around her waist, laughing with 2 men who looked like venture capitalists. "Celebrating our upcoming wedding," she said proudly. Then she zoomed the camera back on herself. "And entertaining some very important partners tonight," she winked. I stood under the airport awning watching this while rain ran down the concrete like little rivers. Then something happened. At first it was just a distant sound, low, heavy, the kind of sound you feel in your chest before you hear it clearly. The live stream camera picked it up before Sloane noticed. The audio started vibrating. People in the club looked around. "What is that?" someone shouted. Then the sound grew louder. Rotor blades. Very loud rotor blades. The live stream camera turned toward the club windows. Outside, the sky above the city glowed with searchlights. Back at the airport, I looked up. A black shape descended through the rain. A UH-60 Black Hawk. Military. It swept low across the runway lights and then banked toward the restricted side of the airport. Security vehicles were already clearing the area. The helicopter settled onto the wet tarmac with a blast of wind that pushed rain sideways. Airport workers stared. One security guard muttered, "What the hell?" Meanwhile, inside the nightclub livestream, Sloane pointed her camera toward the distant lights outside. The sound of the helicopter even reached them. She laughed. "Oh wow," she said sarcastically. "Looks like some general wants to make a dramatic entrance tonight." People around her laughed. Someone joked about government money. She lifted her champagne glass toward the window. "To the military," she said. Then she took a sip. At the airport, the helicopter door slid open. A crew chief jumped out and scanned the area. His eyes landed on me immediately. He walked over through the rain. "You Avery?" he asked over the rotor noise. "Yes." He nodded once. "Ma'am, transport is ready." I grabbed my bag. The wind from the rotors whipped rain across the runway as we walked toward the helicopter. The crew chief helped me climb inside. The door slammed shut. The helicopter lifted into the dark sky seconds later. Back in the nightclub, Sloane kept laughing with her guests. She thought she had just abandoned her inconvenient little sister in the rain at 2 a.m. What she didn't know was that the helicopter she had just mocked on her live stream had been sent by the Department of Defense to pick me up. And the first target in the investigation I had just been assigned was her fiancé. The crew chief handed me a headset the second the helicopter leveled out. I strapped it on and tightened the belt across my chest as the Black Hawk pushed through the storm clouds. The inside of the aircraft glowed in dim red light, the kind pilots use so their night vision doesn't get wrecked. Most people imagine military helicopters like scenes from movies shouting chaos drama. The reality is quieter. Just engines, wind, and people who already know exactly why they're here. I wiped rain from my sleeve and leaned back against the metal frame. Across from me sat General Whitman. Same posture as always, back straight, hands folded. The kind of calm that only shows up in people who have spent decades dealing with problems that could level entire countries. He studied me for a second. "You look like hell, Commander." I shrugged. "Long flight, that's not what I meant." He slid a sealed tablet across the narrow space between us. The device was military issue. Hardened casing, encryption ports, no network access without authorization. I unlocked it using my thumbprint. The screen came alive instantly. Classified investigation, level Omega. My name appeared as the lead investigator. I scrolled. Then the first file opened. Julian Carter, age 36. Founder and CEO of Carter Dynamics Logistics. A normal person would recognize the name from tech magazines. Startup genius, defense logistics innovator, billion-dollar government contracts. The kind of man investors loved and politicians loved even more. I knew him as something else, my future brother-in-law. Whitman watched my face carefully. "You didn't know?" he asked. "I suspected he was arrogant," I said. "Didn't realize he was stupid." Whitman gave the smallest hint of a smile. "Keep reading." The helicopter rocked slightly as we cut through turbulence. Lines of data scrolled across the screen, shipping manifests, corporate ownership charts, shell companies stacked like Russian dolls, one in Delaware, another in Singapore, 3 more in Panama. Classic laundering architecture. Whoever built this network knew exactly how to hide money. Unfortunately for them, government analysts are very patient people. 3 months ago, Whitman said through the headset we intercepted a leak involving weapons guidance software. I scrolled to the next file. A digital schematic appeared. Targeting algorithms, missile navigation code, restricted material, someone selling military positioning software, he continued. And the trail leads to Carter Dynamics. The screen shifted to financial transactions, large ones, millions moving between offshore accounts. "Foreign buyers?" I asked. Whitman nodded. "Several." I scrolled further. Transfers routed through private equity funds, then through holding companies, then through a bank in Switzerland. Julian had built a maze, the kind of maze designed to make investigators give up halfway through. Too bad for him, I had spent 6 months tracking supply chains in places where people tried to hide missiles inside grain shipments. Compared to that, Julian's operation looked amateur. Who flagged him? I asked. Whitman leaned forward. Your team in Cyprus. That made sense. We had been monitoring encrypted satellite communications in the region. One message had referenced a shipment code that didn't match anything in NATO databases. That was the thread. Now here we were. The helicopter tilted slightly as the pilot adjusted course. The rain hammered the metal hull. I kept reading. More transfers, more companies. Then the financial logs opened. A long column of transactions appeared. Large deposits moving through an offshore bank in the Cayman Islands. I slowed my scrolling. Something looked familiar. Whitman noticed. You see it? Yeah. A digital authorization stamp appeared beside one of the transfers. An electronic signature. The name beneath it made my hand stop moving. Sloan Hart. For a moment, the only sound in my headset was rotor blades. I leaned closer to the screen. Maybe it was a coincidence. Common name, different person. I opened the authorization record. Full identity verification, date of birth, address, everything matched. My sister. Whitman didn't interrupt. He let me process it. I leaned back slowly. So she's not just dating the guy, I said. No, she's helping him move the money. Whitman nodded once. She manages the shell corporation that routes the Cayman transfers. I stared at the screen. Images of the nightclub livestream flashed through my mind. Champagne, laughing, talking about investors. Apparently that part hadn't been a lie. Just not the kind of investors she was admitting to. When did she start? I asked. Whitman tapped the tablet. The transaction history expanded. 8 months ago, 8 months. That meant something important. She had already been working with Julian before my last deployment. Before the engagement announcement. Before the giant family dinner where she told everyone she was marrying the smartest man in Silicon Valley. I exhaled slowly. Let me guess, I said. She thinks she's marrying a billionaire. Whitman's expression didn't change. That's likely what he told her. I zoomed into the financial network. Money leaving government contractors, moving through Carter Dynamics, then vanishing offshore. Julian wasn't just stealing information. He was selling targeting software to foreign buyers, which meant every system he leaked could eventually point weapons back at American soldiers. Whitman folded his arms. Commander, this operation is now officially yours. I kept reading the files. Intercepted emails, encrypted chat logs, bank authorizations. Every piece pointed back to Julian, and every 10th transaction carried the same electronic signature, Sloan Hart. My sister had spent the last 8 months laundering money for a man committing federal espionage. I closed the file for a moment. Whitman watched me carefully. You still good to run this investigation? Yes. No conflicts. I looked back at the screen. There are moments when people expect dramatic reactions. Shock, anger, tears. The truth is simpler. Training teaches you to separate emotion from action. You can process feelings later. Right now, there was a job. I reopened the financial logs. I'll handle it. Whitman nodded. Good. The helicopter climbed higher through the storm. The red lights inside the cabin flickered slightly as we passed another cloud layer. I zoomed in on one of the Cayman transactions. $2 million, authorization Sloan Hart, purpose code consulting. I almost laughed. Consulting, apparently selling missile software counted as consulting now. Whitman leaned forward. You understand the scope of this? Yeah. If Carter gets nervous, he'll try to move assets. I know. He'll try to destroy evidence. He already is. The general studied me. And your sister? I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the transaction log. Every number told a story. Every transfer meant someone had chosen greed over loyalty. Sloan thought she was marrying the richest man in the room. She thought she had finally outranked everyone in the family. She thought the wedding would be the biggest moment of her life. I tapped the screen and pulled up the Cayman account again. Her digital signature sat there in clean blue letters. Sloan Hart. I looked at it for a long time. Then I said quietly into the headset. She thinks she's about to wear the most expensive wedding dress money can buy. Whitman didn't say anything. The helicopter continued flying through the dark. I leaned back in the seat and kept staring at the financial record carrying my sister's name. What she didn't know yet was that the most important outfit she would wear this year wouldn't be a wedding dress. It would be the one they hand you in an FBI interrogation room. I set the fork down slowly and looked across the dinner table at Julian. The man loved an audience. That much was obvious the moment I walked into my parents' dining room. The table was set like it was Thanksgiving, even though it was just a Tuesday night. My mother had brought out the expensive plates she only used when she wanted guests to feel impressed. Crystal glasses, polished silverware, candles. Julian sat at the head of the table beside my sister like he already owned the house. Which, to be fair, my father probably hoped he would someday. Sloane looked radiant. Designer dress, perfect makeup, the kind of smile people practice in mirrors when they know cameras will be around. My parents were glowing with pride. I took the empty chair at the far end of the table. No one stood up when I entered. No one asked about my flight. That part didn't surprise me. My mother poured wine into Julian's glass like he was royalty. "So tell them the news," she said excitedly. Julian leaned back with the relaxed confidence of someone who had spent years learning how to sound impressive without actually saying anything. Well, he began swirling the wine dramatically. Carter Dynamics just secured a new logistics contract. My father leaned forward. With who? Julian smiled. $15 million. My father nearly dropped his glass. 15, Julian nodded casually. Defense sector. That made my father even happier. He slapped the table once. That's my boy. My mother clapped softly like she was attending a charity dinner. Sloane beamed beside him. I told you he was brilliant. Julian shrugged modestly. Just good timing and smart partnerships. I took a sip of water and watched him. He had practiced this performance many times. Confident tone, measured pauses, just enough humility to make the bragging sound believable. My father lifted his glass. To Julian. Everyone raised theirs except me. He noticed. Then his eyes drifted toward my clothes. I was still wearing simple dark jeans and a plain jacket. Travel clothes. Functional, not impressive. My father sighed like he had just noticed a stain on the carpet. Avery, he said, shaking his head slightly. You really should try harder. I looked up. At what? He gestured vaguely at me. At life. Sloane chuckled quietly. My father continued. Look at your sister. She knows how to present herself. Sloane sat up straighter. Presentation matters. Julian nodded. It opens doors. My father leaned back in his chair. You could learn something from her. I waited. Then he added the line I knew was coming. That desk job of yours can't be paying much. The table went quiet for a second. Sloane smirked. Julian chuckled under his breath. I took another drink of water. It pays enough. My father waved his hand dismissively. Enough for what? Gas money. Sloane leaned closer to Julian. She's basically a military secretary. Julian laughed louder this time. Well, someone has to file the paperwork. The joke landed exactly the way they wanted it to. My mother laughed politely. My father grinned. Julian reached into his wallet. He pulled out a crisp $100 bill. Then he flicked it onto the table in front of me. The bill slid across the wood and stopped beside my plate. Here, he said casually. The room went quiet again. Buy yourself something nice for the wedding. Sloane covered her mouth while laughing. My father shook his head like this was all harmless fun. Julian leaned back in his chair. You'll want something a little more presentable than that jacket. For a few seconds, no one spoke. I looked down at the $100 bill. Then I picked it up, folded it neatly once, then again. I placed it in front of me on the table. Julian watched me with that confident smile he used when he believed he controlled the room. I finally looked up and met his eyes. Thanks, Julian, he nodded proudly. Then I added calmly, I hope the account ending in 4892 in Switzerland still has enough money left to pay for the wedding. For a moment, nothing happened. The room stayed perfectly still. Then Julian dropped his fork. The metal clattered against the plate. Sloane blinked. What? My father looked between us. What account? Julian's face had gone pale. Not embarrassed pale. Not awkward pale. The kind of pale people get when their brain suddenly realizes a very expensive secret might not be secret anymore. He tried to laugh. It came out wrong. I think you've been watching too many spy movies. I shrugged. Maybe. Sloane frowned. Avery, what are you talking about? I leaned back in my chair and picked up my glass again. Nothing important. Julian grabbed his wine and took a long drink. His hand trembled slightly. My father looked annoyed. You two speaking another language, Julian forced a smile. It's a joke. Sloane studied his face. You look weird. I'm fine. My mother tried to recover the mood. Well, she said nervously. Let's eat before everything gets cold. No one touched their food. Julian wiped his forehead with a napkin. The room had shifted. Not dramatically, just enough that the air felt heavier. My father looked confused. Sloane looked suspicious. But Julian? Julian looked like a man who had just discovered the floor beneath him might not be solid anymore. I finished my water and stood up. Dinner was great. My mother frowned. You're leaving already early morning. Julian watched me carefully, trying to read my face, trying to decide how much I knew. I grabbed my jacket. Before I reached the door, Sloane spoke again. What did that even mean? I glanced back at the table. It means, I said casually, you should probably double-check your finances before sending out wedding invitations. Julian's knuckles tightened around his wine glass. My father laughed awkwardly. Your sister's got a strange sense of humor. I opened the door. Cool night air drifted inside. Behind me no one spoke, but I could feel Julian's eyes burning into my back. I stepped outside and closed the door. Inside that dining room, my parents believed they had just witnessed an awkward joke. A weird comment from the quiet daughter who worked a boring military desk job. But Julian knew better. And judging by the cold sweat forming on his forehead, he had just realized something terrifying. The psychological part of this operation had officially begun. I was halfway through my morning coffee when Sloane called. Her voice came through the phone like she was doing me a huge favor. Avery, I need you today. That sentence alone should have warned me something ridiculous was coming. For what I asked. Wedding dress shopping. I waited. And you're coming. I didn't know I was invited. You're not, she said cheerfully. You're carrying bags. I almost laughed. Of course. Meet us downtown in an hour, she added. Julian already reserved the private fitting room. Then she hung up. An hour later, I walked into one of the most expensive bridal boutiques in the city. You could tell immediately by the smell. Luxury stores always smell like expensive perfume and quiet judgment. Soft lighting, cream-colored walls, wedding dresses displayed like museum pieces, each one probably worth more than my car. Sloane stood in the center of the showroom like she owned the place. Julian stood beside her talking with the store manager. Both of them looked extremely pleased with themselves. Sloane spotted me and waved like she was greeting hired help. Over here. I walked over. She looked me up and down. You could have dressed up a little. I thought I was carrying bags. Julian chuckled. She's got a point. The manager smiled politely and clapped her hands. Shall we begin? Sloane followed her into the fitting area. 20 minutes later, the curtain opened. Sloane stepped out wearing the kind of dress that probably required its own security guard. Long train, hand-stitched lace, enough fabric to make a small parachute. The manager practically glowed with pride. This is one of our exclusive designs. Sloane turned slowly in front of the mirror. Julian stared like he was watching a luxury car commercial. How much, he asked. The manager smiled politely. 40,000. Julian didn't hesitate. Perfect. Sloane clapped her hands excitedly. I love it. The manager looked at me. You're the sister, apparently. What do you think? I shrugged. It's very white. Sloane rolled her eyes. You have no taste. Julian pulled his wallet out. The famous black credit card slid between his fingers like a magic trick. If confidence were currency, this man would have been the richest person alive. He handed the card to the manager. Let's reserve it. She nodded and walked to the payment counter. The store was quiet. Everyone waited politely. Then the payment terminal beeped. A sharp sound. The manager frowned slightly. She tried again. The machine beeped again. A red light blinked. Sloane noticed. What's wrong? The manager kept smiling, but the smile had tightened a little. Just a moment. She ran the card again. Beep. Red light. Declined. Julian frowned. That's impossible. The manager tried one more time. Same result. The machine flashed red like a warning alarm. Sloane crossed her arms. What's happening? The manager turned to Julian politely. Sir, it appears the card isn't going through. Julian laughed. That card doesn't decline. Well, today it did. He took the card back. Must be the terminal. The manager stepped aside and gestured toward the phone. You're welcome to call the bank. Julian dialed the number printed on the back of the card. The phone rang. Sloane paced beside him in the giant wedding dress. This store better not be messing with us. Julian waited while the call connected. Then someone answered. His voice changed immediately, professional, calm. Yes, I'm calling about a declined transaction. Pause. He listened. His expression shifted. What do you mean? Frozen. Sloane stopped pacing. What? Julian turned slightly away from her. I need clarification, he said into the phone. Another pause. Then the voice on the other end spoke long enough for Julian's face to lose color. Slowly, very slowly, he lowered the phone. The room had gone silent. Sloane grabbed his arm. What did they say? Julian cleared his throat. Temporary issue. The manager waited patiently. Sloane narrowed her eyes. What kind of issue? Julian hesitated. Then he repeated the words carefully. They said, the account is currently frozen. Sloane blinked. What? Julian forced a laugh. Must be a security review. What kind of security review? He didn't answer, because I already knew the exact words the bank operator had used. Account frozen by order of the Department of Defense Task Force. Sloane grabbed the manager's counter. This is ridiculous. The manager stayed calm. Unfortunately, the payment didn't go through. Sloane turned on the staff instantly. Are you serious right now? Do you know who he is? Julian wiped sweat from his forehead. It's probably a data leak, he muttered. Sloane stared at him. A what? Someone may have triggered a fraud flag. The manager cleared her throat. Would you like to try another payment method? Sloane looked at Julian. Well, Julian checked his phone quickly. His fingers moved faster now. Probably checking accounts, probably discovering something he didn't like. Just give me a minute, he said. Sloane stepped closer. You said you had plenty of money. I do, then why is your card frozen? He didn't answer. Instead, he looked at me. Really looked at me, carefully. Like he was trying to decide whether the strange comment I made last night was actually a coincidence. Then he forced a smile. Avery, yes. You've been saving money, right? I try. Why don't you cover the deposit for now? Sloane nodded instantly. That's actually a great idea. The manager perked up slightly. Julian continued. We'll transfer it back to you tonight. I looked at the dress again. $40,000. Then I looked back at them. I took a step backward, then another, and shook my head. Not happening. Sloane's eyes widened. What? You heard me. Julian's jaw tightened. It's just temporary. Then you shouldn't need my help. Sloane threw her hands up. You're unbelievable. I shrugged. Probably. The manager quietly folded the receipt paper back into the register. Sloane started yelling at the staff. Julian stepped aside and pulled out his phone again. His fingers were moving even faster now, probably trying to transfer money, move accounts, hide assets. He thought the bank had made a mistake. He thought this was a glitch. He thought he could fix everything before the wedding. What Julian didn't realize was that every single attempt he made to move money right now was being recorded directly on my investigation server. I locked my car and walked 2 blocks away from my parents' house before checking the tablet. The surveillance feed opened instantly. 2 cameras, one inside the hallway, one inside my bedroom. Both silent, both recording. The timestamp showed 7:42 p.m. Dinner had ended less than an hour earlier, which meant if Julian was as paranoid as I suspected, he would already be doing something stupid. I leaned against a street lamp and waited. It didn't take long. At 7:51 p.m., the hallway camera flickered. Julian appeared first. He moved carefully down the hallway toward my bedroom door, like someone who had watched too many spy movies. Behind him walked Sloane. She looked irritated. Why are we doing this? She whispered. Julian didn't answer right away. He studied the door handle. Then he pulled a small metal tool from his pocket. Because your sister knows something. Sloane crossed her arms. She's a military clerk. Julian worked the tool inside the lock. You heard what she said last night. That could have been a guess. Julian turned the tool slowly. I don't like guesses. Click. The lock popped open. Sloane leaned closer. You're overreacting. Julian pushed the door open quietly. That card freezing wasn't random. Sloane frowned. The bank said security review. Julian stepped inside the room. And somehow your sister knew about a Swiss account. That shut her up. The bedroom camera caught everything, every step, every whisper. They walked inside slowly. My room wasn't impressive. Plain desk, small bookshelf, one travel bag near the closet. Nothing flashy, nothing interesting. Sloane looked around. This is depressing. Julian ignored her and started opening drawers. Papers, clothes, nothing important. Sloane sat on the edge of the bed. You really think she's spying on us? Julian checked the desk. I think she overheard something. Where defense logistics offices. Sloane rolled her eyes. She files paperwork. Julian turned around, and yet she mentioned a private account number. Sloane didn't respond. Julian opened the closet. More clothes, military duffel bag. He searched through it quickly. Nothing. The frustration started showing. Damn it. Sloane stood up. Maybe there's nothing here. Julian looked down, under the bed. Something metal reflected the light. He crouched down. Hold on. Sloane leaned closer. What is that? Julian pulled it out slowly. A hard-shell case. Reinforced steel edges, combination lock. The kind of case people usually see in movies when someone is transporting classified equipment. Sloane's eyes widened. What the hell? Julian stood up holding the case. Well, Sloane's voice dropped. Is that military? Julian turned the case in his hands. Looks like it. Sloane suddenly looked nervous. Maybe we shouldn't touch it. Julian set it on the bed. If she has documents about our accounts in here, I need to see them. Sloane backed away slightly. That could be illegal. Julian gave her a look. Sloane, what, you're already laundering money through Cayman accounts? She winced. Don't say it like that. Julian examined the lock. 3-digit combination. He tried a few numbers. Nothing. He pulled harder. Still locked. Sloane shifted nervously. What if she comes back? Julian stood up. She won't. How do you know I watched her leave? He walked to the closet again. A moment later, he came back holding something else. A crowbar. Apparently, my father had been storing tools in the hallway closet. Julian slid the metal bar under the case latch. Sloane looked uncomfortable. Maybe we should stop. Julian pushed down. The metal lock bent slightly. Too late. He pushed harder. Crack. The lock snapped. The case popped open. Both of them leaned forward instantly, expecting documents, hard drives, evidence. Instead, they saw something else. A phone, mounted upright inside the case, camera facing directly at them. Recording. A small red light blinked. Sloane froze. What? Julian didn't move. Because next to the phone sat a folded piece of paper. He slowly picked it up, unfolded it. The camera zoom captured the words perfectly. I had written them with a black marker. 4 simple sentences. I told you. Julian's eyes widened. You were 1 step behind. He kept reading. Julian. Sloane leaned closer. What does it say? Julian didn't answer. Because at that exact moment, the phone inside the case beeped. Once, then again. The screen flashed red. A loud notification alarm activated. Sloane jumped back. What is that? Julian dropped the paper. Shut it off. The phone screen displayed a single message. Intrusion detected. Sloane looked around the room like cameras might be hiding everywhere. Are we being watched? Julian stared at the phone, then slowly looked up toward the ceiling, right toward the tiny lens in the corner of the room. He didn't know where the cameras were, but he knew they existed now. Sloane whispered, Oh my God. Julian's face had gone completely pale, because he had just realized something. Everything they had done in this room, every word, every movement, had been recorded. Proof of forced entry, proof of trespassing, proof of intent. Julian grabbed the crowbar again. Destroy it. Before he could move, the phone beeped again. The alarm got louder, and a second message appeared. Remote backup complete. Julian stopped moving. Sloane stared at him. What does that mean? He swallowed slowly. It means... He didn't finish the sentence, because they both understood. Destroying the phone wouldn't erase anything. The footage had already been uploaded. Sloane grabbed his arm. What do we do? Julian stared at the camera one more time, then at the paper on the bed. My handwriting stared back at him. You're already 1 step behind. He crushed the paper in his hand. Fear does strange things to people. Sometimes it makes them confess. Sometimes it makes them run. But the worst reaction is when fear convinces someone to fight back. Julian's jaw tightened. We handle this another way. Sloane's voice shook. How Julian looked toward the door, then back at the camera. If your sister wants to play games. He picked up the crowbar and tossed it aside. We'll make sure no one believes her. Sloane stared at him. You mean? Julian nodded slowly. Yes. Because instead of turning themselves in, they had just decided to destroy the one person who could expose them. And unfortunately for them, they had just made the worst possible choice. I stepped into the living room and immediately knew something was wrong. The air had that heavy silence people create when they've already decided how a conversation will end. My father sat at the center of the room like a judge waiting for court to start. My mother sat beside him with folded hands and worried eyes. Sloane leaned against the fireplace, pretending to scroll through her phone. Julian stood near the window, calm, confident, like a man who had already rehearsed every line of the story he was about to tell. I walked in and set my bag down. Family meeting, no one laughed. My father pointed at the chair across from him. Sit, I sat. My mother forced a tight smile. Avery, honey, we're concerned about you. That sentence almost made me laugh. Concern in my family usually meant someone was about to do something extremely unpleasant while claiming it was for your own good. Julian stepped forward. I think we should just be direct. My father nodded. Yes, direct. He leaned forward. We know what you've been doing. I looked at him. That's impressive, because I barely know what I've been doing. Sloane rolled her eyes. Julian ignored the joke. You've been threatening us, that's new. You broke into financial information that doesn't belong to you. My father slammed his hand on the table. And now you're trying to extort your own family. The word extort hung in the air like smoke. I picked up the cup of tea sitting on the table. Warm chamomile, my mother's favorite stress solution. I took a slow sip. No, Julian crossed his arms. You mentioned private bank accounts. You made accusations. I made observations. My father shook his head. You see, this is exactly the problem. He looked at my mother. She's not thinking clearly. My mother nodded nervously. Sweetheart, Julian explained something to us. That explained everything. Julian had clearly been busy. My father continued. You've been deployed overseas for months. Yes, you've seen combat. Sometimes. He leaned forward again. And soldiers come back. Different. Sloane chimed in casually. PTSD is very serious. I kept sipping my tea. Julian stepped in smoothly. We think you may be experiencing post-deployment stress. There it was, the diagnosis. Convenient, clean, easy to explain to neighbors. My father slid a folder across the table toward me. Sign this. I looked down. Medical authorization form. Psychiatric evaluation consent. Institutional admission approval. In simpler terms, permission to have me locked inside a mental health facility. I set the cup down. My father spoke again. It's temporary, Julian added helpfully. Just until doctors confirm you're stable. Sloane sighed dramatically. You've been acting paranoid. I leaned back in my chair. You broke into my room yesterday. Julian didn't even blink. See, delusional. My father tapped the paper. Sign it. I looked at him. You think I'm crazy? He slammed his hand down again. You are threatening this family. I mentioned a bank account. That's exactly the kind of thing someone unstable says. My mother spoke softly. Avery, this will help you. Julian nodded. Doctors can treat combat trauma, Sloane added quietly. And if you're not well, you shouldn't be walking around making accusations. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone. My father frowned. What are you doing? I set the phone on the table, screen down. Then I picked up my tea again, sipped it slowly. My father's voice grew louder. You will sign this paper. No. His face turned red instantly. I'm not asking. Sounds like you are. Sloane shook her head like she was tired of dealing with a stubborn child. Just sign it, Avery. Julian leaned closer. You don't want things to escalate. My father grabbed the paper and shoved it closer. You embarrass this family every time you open your mouth. I looked at him calmly. He continued shouting. You're jealous of your sister. No, you can't stand that she's successful. Incorrect. You've always been the failure. There it was, the family favorite, failure. My father jabbed his finger toward the paper again. You are the shame of this family. My mother gasped quietly. Sloane said nothing. Julian watched carefully. My father leaned closer. Sign it before I call the police. I picked up the pen. My father relaxed slightly. Good. Julian smiled faintly. Sloane crossed her arms with satisfaction. I turned the paper slowly. Then I signed. Not the medical authorization section. The acknowledgement line. Signature only. My father grabbed the folder immediately. Finally. Julian exhaled. Sloane rolled her eyes again. Drama for nothing. I picked up my phone, turned it over, pressed the screen once. The red recording icon stopped blinking. Julian noticed instantly. What is that? I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Documentation. My father frowned. Documentation of what I stood up. Threats. Julian's smile disappeared. I picked up my jacket. You threatened to call the police to force a medical commitment. My father scoffed. I'm your father, yes. That's not illegal, correct? Julian stepped forward, but I looked at him. But interfering with a federal investigation is... The room froze. No one spoke. My father frowned. What investigation? I opened the front door. Cold air moved into the hallway. You'll probably hear about it soon. Sloane stared at me. Julian looked like someone had just unplugged his brain. I stepped outside. Before closing the door, I looked back at my father. He stood in the middle of the room, holding the signed paperwork like a trophy. He thought he had just protected the family. He believed sacrificing the daughter he never respected was the logical solution. What he didn't realize was that the document he forced me to sign had just become evidence that he had attempted to obstruct a federal operation. I closed the door behind me, and the next phase of this investigation was already moving into position. I adjusted the white service apron and picked up a tray of champagne glasses. The ballroom was enormous. 300 guests, maybe more. Politicians, investors, military officers, people who owned companies with names no one outside their boardrooms understood. Expensive suits everywhere, cameras, soft music drifting through the hall. My sister had spared no expense. The place looked like a movie set for rich people pretending to be humble. Crystal chandeliers hung above the dance floor. White roses covered every table. A massive banner near the stage displayed 2 names in gold letters, Sloane and Julian. I walked past a row of guests who barely noticed me. That was the advantage of wearing a service uniform. People who thought they were important rarely looked at anyone carrying drinks. Behind the bar area, 2 real catering workers were whispering. Did you see that dress? 40,000, I heard. Must be nice. I kept moving. Across the room, Sloane stood on the stage platform, smiling like she had finally reached the top of the mountain she'd been climbing her entire life. The wedding dress was even more dramatic than the one in the boutique. Long train, sparkling fabric, enough lace to make an entire curtain factory proud. Julian stood beside her in a custom suit. He looked confident again. That confidence had returned the moment he convinced himself everything was under control. Apparently, frozen accounts, suspicious investigations, and cameras inside my bedroom were just minor inconveniences in his mind. My father moved through the crowd shaking hands with guests. I heard him say the same sentence 3 times in a row. My future son-in-law is a genius. My mother stood near the front row, wiping emotional tears. Sloane grabbed the microphone. Thank you all for coming tonight. Applause filled the room. Julian placed a hand gently on her back, like they were royalty greeting their kingdom. This night means everything to us, she continued. More applause. Then she added the line she had clearly rehearsed. And we're honored to have a very special guest attending tonight. The crowd leaned forward. General Whitman. That name got everyone's attention. Several people in the room were military contractors. A few actual officers sat near the front tables. The idea that a 4-star general would attend a private wedding made the entire event look more important. Julian smiled proudly. We're just waiting for him to arrive. My father nodded enthusiastically. He should be here any minute. Sloane glanced around the room. Then she noticed me, standing near the back with the catering staff. Her smile tightened slightly. She stepped down from the stage and walked across the floor. The train of her dress dragged across the polished wood behind her like a parade banner. She stopped in front of me. You. I looked at her. Yes. Her voice dropped to a whisper. What are you doing out here, working? She glared. You were told not to come near the main floor. You said I could help the catering team. Yes. Help them, not stand where guests can see you. I looked around. Everyone was already looking at the stage again. No one cares. I care. She grabbed my arm slightly. You will stay in the service area. I shrugged. If that makes you happy, she leaned closer. And don't embarrass this family tonight. I almost laughed. I wouldn't dream of it. She released my arm and walked back toward the stage. Julian watched us carefully, trying to read the situation, trying to determine whether I was still a threat. He had spent the last 3 days attempting to move money through offshore channels. Every attempt had failed. Accounts frozen, transfers blocked, servers monitored, but he still believed he could fix it. People like Julian always believe they are smarter than systems designed by entire intelligence agencies. The music stopped. Someone near the entrance spoke into a microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome General Whitman. The giant wooden doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. Every head turned. My father rushed forward immediately. Julian followed him. Both men wore enormous smiles. 2 security officers stepped through the doorway first. Then General Whitman entered the room. Tall, calm, expression unreadable. The entire crowd stood. Applause echoed across the hall. My father reached him first. "General." "What an honor," Julian extended his hand. "We're so glad you could come." Whitman looked at them, briefly, then walked straight past them. Didn't shake their hands. Didn't stop. Didn't even acknowledge their existence. My father froze mid-smile. Julian turned slowly, confused. Whitman continued walking across the ballroom, straight toward the catering area, straight toward me. The crowd watched quietly now, 300 people tracking the same strange moment. Whitman stopped exactly 2 feet in front of me. Then something happened that no one in that room expected. He brought his heels together sharply, raised his hand, and saluted. "Commander." The room went completely silent. Not quiet. Silent. You could hear someone drop a fork somewhere in the back. Whitman lowered his hand. "Task force units have secured all exits." Behind him, several guests suddenly realized the men near the walls were not waiters. They were federal agents. Whitman spoke again. "Primary target confirmed inside the building." He looked directly at me. "Awaiting your order." Across the ballroom, my father stood frozen beside the entrance. Julian looked like someone had just removed gravity from the planet. And Sloane? Sloane still stood on the stage in her wedding dress. Her smile slowly disappeared. Her face turned pale. Because at that exact moment, she finally understood something. The quiet sister she had mocked for years, the military clerk she thought spent her life pushing paperwork, was the commanding officer of the operation that had just surrounded her wedding. 300 guests stood in stunned silence, and my sister had just learned what my job actually was. 300 people were staring at me, some confused, some curious, some already starting to realize they had accidentally walked into something far more interesting than a wedding. General Whitman was still standing in front of me waiting, patient, professional. Behind him, the agents positioned around the room were watching my signal. Across the ballroom, my father finally found his voice. "What is going on here?" Julian stepped forward quickly, trying to regain control. "General Whitman." "I think there's been a misunderstanding." Whitman didn't even look at him. His eyes stayed on me. The room waited. I reached up slowly and untied the catering apron. It slid off my shoulders and landed on the table beside the tray of champagne glasses. Underneath it was the uniform I had been wearing the entire time. Class A military dress, dark blue, perfectly pressed. Rows of ribbons across the chest, service medals, unit insignia. 300 people watched in silence as the room recalculated everything they thought they knew about me. Sloane stared at the uniform like it had personally insulted her. My father looked confused. Julian looked terrified. I gave Whitman a small nod. That was the signal. The doors at the side of the ballroom burst open, then the doors at the back, then the service entrance. Agents poured into the room. FBI, military police. More than a dozen, moving fast, moving with purpose. Guests jumped back from their tables. Someone screamed. A man near the bar tried to film everything with his phone until an agent politely told him to lower it. Julian took 2 steps backward. "What the hell is this?" An FBI agent approached him calmly. "Julian Carter." Julian raised both hands. "This is ridiculous." The agent grabbed his wrist. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit espionage, illegal transfer of defense technology, and financial crimes related to foreign intelligence operations." The metal click of handcuffs echoed through the ballroom. Julian's confident posture collapsed instantly. "I want a lawyer. You'll get one." They pushed him toward the center of the room. Meanwhile, 2 agents approached the stage. Sloane backed away from them instinctively. "You can't be serious." One of the agents spoke calmly. "Sloane Hart." She shook her head violently. "No, you're being detained in connection with financial transactions related to this investigation." She pointed toward Julian. "That's his business. Your signature appears on several offshore transfers." Her face went pale. My father rushed forward. "Stop this right now." 2 military police officers stepped in front of him. "Sir, please remain where you are. I'm calling my lawyer." "You're free to do that." He pointed at me. "She's lying." An FBI agent spoke behind him. "Richard Hart." My father turned. "Yes, you're being detained for obstruction of a federal investigation." His mouth fell open. That's absurd. You attempted to force a medical commitment to silence a federal investigator. His eyes moved toward me, realization finally catching up. You recorded that. Yes. 2 agents took hold of his arms. The ballroom had completely lost its elegant atmosphere. Guests whispered. Phones came out. Some people quietly walked toward the exits. Meanwhile, the giant display screen behind the stage flickered. The wedding slideshow disappeared. In its place appeared something else. Financial records, wire transfers, account numbers, Julian's shell companies, millions of dollars moving across international banks. Then the screen changed again. Video footage appeared. My bedroom, Julian and Sloane breaking the lock, searching drawers, pulling the steel case from under the bed. The crowd gasped. Julian stopped struggling. His knees slowly bent. Then he dropped to the floor. Just like that. All the arrogance gone, all the confidence gone. He looked at the screen like someone watching his own execution. Please. The agent tightened the cuffs. You should have thought about that before selling military targeting software, Sloane screamed. This is insane. Her dress dragged across the floor as she tried to pull away from the agents. This is my wedding. One of the agents calmly guided her toward the exit. Not anymore. She grabbed my father's sleeve desperately. Dad do something he couldn't, because 2 agents were already escorting him in the opposite direction. My mother stood near the front row crying. No one moved to comfort her. Guests slowly backed away from the chaos. No one wanted to stand too close to a federal arrest scene. Within minutes, the ballroom that had been designed for celebration looked more like a crime scene. Julian was on his feet again, cuffed, head lowered. 2 agents held him firmly. Sloane's perfect dress was stained where it dragged across the floor. Her makeup had started to run. My father looked older than he had an hour earlier. Whitman stood beside me quietly. Clean operation. Good team. Agents began escorting the 3 of them toward the exits. Sloane turned back once. Her eyes locked on mine. You did this. I didn't answer. Because technically she was right. But she had done most of the work herself. The ballroom doors closed behind the agents. The room slowly filled with quiet conversations. 300 witnesses to the fastest collapse of a fake empire I had ever seen. 5 minutes. That was all it took. 5 minutes for the entire illusion my family had built around money and status to disappear. Whitman glanced toward the empty stage. Efficient, yes. Guests began leaving quickly now. No one wanted to explain to the press why they had attended a wedding that turned into an espionage arrest. The music never started again. The champagne stayed untouched, and the giant banner behind the stage still read, Sloane and Julian. Whitman looked at me. You want to say anything to them before transport? I watched the agents escort my family toward the waiting vehicles outside. The arrest wasn't the real punishment. Handcuffs were temporary. Prison was predictable. The worst part was what I was about to tell them next. I stepped out of the ballroom and into the cold night air. The flashing lights from federal vehicles painted the entire parking area in red and blue. Agents moved quickly around the entrance, securing the scene and guiding the last confused guests away from the building. The wedding venue had been built to impress people. Tonight, it looked like a crime scene. 2 lines of military police stood on each side of the walkway, leading to the parking lot. Their posture was rigid professional and completely indifferent to the drama unfolding between them. Julian walked first. His hands were cuffed behind his back. The expensive suit that had looked so perfect an hour earlier was now wrinkled and damp with sweat. He didn't look at anyone, not the guests, not the cameras, not me. 2 FBI agents guided him forward while reading him the formal charges again. Conspiracy to commit espionage, unauthorized transfer of defense technology, financial crimes involving foreign intelligence entities. Each word landed like a hammer. Behind him walked Sloane. The wedding dress dragged across the pavement, the white fabric collecting dirt and water from the ground. The long train that had once looked so elegant now looked like a mop someone forgot to pick up. Her makeup had completely fallen apart. She wasn't crying gracefully anymore. She was screaming, "This is insane, I didn't do anything." An agent tightened his grip on her arm. You authorized offshore transactions connected to the investigation. That was business. Tell it to the court. She turned toward me when she saw me standing near the vehicles. Her voice changed instantly. Avery, I didn't move. You have to stop this. The agents paused for a moment while she struggled against their hold. "This is a mistake," she shouted. "You know it is," I kept watching her. For the first time in years, she looked small. Not powerful, not glamorous, just desperate. Julian kept walking ahead without turning around. He already knew there was no way out. My father appeared next. 2 agents walked beside him. His face had lost all the authority it usually carried. He looked like someone who had just discovered the rules of the game had changed without telling him. He stared at me as they moved him forward. "You set us up. No, you betrayed your family." I didn't answer, because explaining reality to someone who had ignored it his entire life rarely works. Behind him came my mother, Vivian. She had not been arrested, not yet. But she looked like someone whose entire world had collapsed in the last 10 minutes. She rushed forward the moment she saw me. Agent stepped aside, allowing her to approach. "Avery." Her voice cracked halfway through my name. She grabbed my arm. "You have to fix this. I can't. You can." Her eyes filled with tears. "They're taking your sister." "Yes, she's family." I didn't say anything. Vivian suddenly dropped to her knees on the wet pavement. Several guests gasped quietly behind us. She grabbed the edge of my coat. "Please," she whispered. "She's your blood." Her voice broke completely. "Save your sister." For a moment, the entire parking lot went quiet. Even the agents paused. Everyone was waiting for my answer. I looked down at her. There was no anger left inside me. No satisfaction, no triumph, just distance. The kind of distance people develop when they finally understand they no longer belong in the same world as the people standing in front of them. I gently stepped back so she released my coat. Then I spoke. "Family isn't something you abandon at 2 a.m. in the rain." My voice was calm, steady, and then pick up again when you're about to go to prison. Vivian stared at me like she had never heard me speak before. Sloane froze several feet away while the agents held her. Julian finally stopped walking. Even my father looked back. I continued. "The wedding is over." The wind moved across the parking lot, and so is the idea that we're still a family. No one spoke. Sloane's face turned white again. Julian lowered his head. My father looked like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. The agents gently guided them forward again. The vehicles waited with open doors. Julian was placed in the first one. Sloane screamed one last time as they moved her into the second. My father followed into another vehicle without speaking. The doors shut. One by one, the cars pulled away. The flashing lights slowly disappeared down the road. The parking lot became quiet again. Only the distant sound of rotor blades filled the air now. General Whitman walked up beside me. "Transport is ready," I nodded. Across the open field behind the venue, the Black Hawk waited with its engines running. The rotor blades cut through the night sky, sending waves of air across the grass. We walked toward it together. Each step felt lighter than the last. Not because revenge felt good, but because something heavier had finally been left behind. Halfway to the helicopter, Whitman glanced at me. "You okay?" "Yes." "You didn't hesitate." There was nothing left to hesitate about. He nodded. The crew chief opened the side door of the helicopter. I climbed inside and took the seat near the window. Whitman followed. The door slid shut. Seconds later, the helicopter lifted off the ground. The wedding venue shrank beneath us. The parking lot, the ballroom, the place where my family's illusion of power had finally burned itself out. From the air, it looked small, almost unimportant. I watched the lights disappear into the distance. Some people spend their entire lives trying to win arguments inside a broken family, trying to prove they deserve respect, trying to earn love that was never really there. I had spent years doing that, until the night my sister left me standing in the rain at 2 a.m. That was the moment something inside me finally stopped trying. The helicopter turned toward the city lights on the horizon. A new mission was already waiting. A new life, too. And for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't looking back. The city lights were already far behind us when I finally leaned back in the helicopter seat. From up there, everything looked small. The ballroom where the wedding had collapsed. The parking lot where my family had been taken away in federal vehicles. Even the roads and buildings that once felt important. Distance does something interesting to your mind. It clears the noise. For the first time that night, no one was yelling. No one was accusing me of ruining their lives. No one was pretending money made them better than everyone else. It was just the steady hum of the helicopter engine and the quiet space inside my own thoughts. A lot of people think my story is about revenge. It isn't. Revenge was just the part that looked dramatic. The real story is about something much simpler: learning your worth, and learning when to stop begging the wrong people to see it. For most of my life, I thought family meant loyalty no matter what. You defend them, you protect them, you forgive them, even when they treat you like you don't matter. That idea sounds noble when people say it in movies, but in real life, it can become a trap. Because some families don't see loyalty as something they should return. They see it as something they can use. Growing up, I was always the quiet one. The one who didn't care about appearances or money or impressing the neighbors. I joined the military because I wanted purpose, not status. To my father, that meant I lacked ambition. To my sister, it meant I was the boring one. They didn't see discipline. They saw inconvenience. And the funny thing about people like that is they rarely change. Not when you work harder, not when you explain yourself better, not when you try to earn their respect. People who measure value with money and status usually keep using the same scale forever. For years, I thought if I just proved myself enough, things would change. If I worked harder, if I accomplished more, if I made them proud. But here's the truth most people learn too late. Respect isn't something you can beg for. And the moment you stop trying to earn it from the wrong people, something interesting happens. You realize you didn't actually need it in the first place. The night Sloane left me standing at the airport in the rain was the moment that finally became clear. Not because it hurt. Honestly, by then I expected it, but because it showed something very simple. If someone can abandon you that easily when you need them, then they already decided long ago that you didn't matter. And once you see that clearly, everything else changes. Another thing I learned through this whole situation is the power of silence. A lot of people believe strength means arguing back, defending yourself, winning every confrontation. But sometimes the smartest move is doing the opposite. Watching, listening, letting people reveal exactly who they are. Every insult my family threw at me gave them confidence. They thought I was weak because I didn't respond. What they didn't understand was that silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes silence is patience. Sometimes it's strategy. And sometimes it's simply knowing that the truth doesn't need to be shouted. It just needs time. The funny part is that Julian and Sloane did most of the work themselves. Julian thought he was too smart to get caught. Sloane thought money made her untouchable. My father thought protecting the family name mattered more than protecting his own daughter. I didn't destroy their lives. They did that on their own. All I did was stop standing in the way. That's another lesson people rarely talk about. You don't have to destroy toxic relationships. Sometimes all you need to do is stop protecting them. When you stop covering for people, stop explaining their behavior, stop pretending their actions are acceptable, the truth eventually surfaces on its own. And when it does, it usually collapses everything built on top of it. But the biggest lesson from all of this has nothing to do with revenge or investigations or courtroom charges. It has to do with self-respect. Because the hardest boundary to set in life isn't with strangers. It's with the people you once believed would always stand beside you. Walking away from toxic family members feels wrong at first. Every part of your upbringing tells you that you're supposed to stay. That blood means loyalty. That forgiveness means tolerance. But there's a difference between forgiveness and surrender. Forgiveness means you stop carrying anger. Surrender means you keep allowing someone to hurt you. Those are not the same thing. And once you understand that difference, your life changes. If you're watching this and you recognize parts of your own story in mine, then there's something I want you to remember. You don't need to earn the right to be respected. You don't need to compete with someone else's version of success. And you definitely don't need to stay in environments where people constantly make you feel small. The people who truly value you don't need convincing. They don't need proof. They don't need you to change who you are to deserve their respect. They see it naturally. Everyone else, well, sometimes the best thing you can do is let them keep their opinions and move on without them. As the helicopter continued toward the city lights, I realized something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the kind that comes from winning an argument, the kind that comes from finally closing a door that should have been closed a long time ago. And that lesson turned out to be far more valuable than revenge. The helicopter was already halfway across the city when I stopped looking out the window. For years, I had imagined what it would feel like to finally prove my family wrong. I thought it would feel like victory, like justice, like the kind of moment where everything suddenly makes sense. But sitting there in the dim red light of the aircraft cabin, I realized something unexpected. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like closure. A lot of people misunderstand what revenge actually does. They imagine it fixes the past. They imagine it erases the years of disrespect, the insults, the moments when people made you feel small. But revenge doesn't erase anything. It doesn't rewrite your history. It just ends the argument. That's all it really does. And sometimes ending the argument, our argument is enough. The real change happens somewhere else. It happens the moment you stop asking the wrong people for approval. For most of my life, I believed if I worked hard enough, my family would eventually see me differently. That if I accomplished enough, they would respect me. That if I proved my worth, they would finally treat me like I mattered. But the truth is, people who measure value through status rarely change their measurements. To them, success always looks the same: money, influence, power. And if your life doesn't look like that, they assume you failed. It took me a long time to realize something important. You can't change the way someone sees the world if they benefit from seeing it that way. My father respected Julian because Julian looked successful: expensive suits, business deals, million-dollar contracts. It didn't matter whether any of it was real. The image was enough. Sloane built her entire identity around that same image. To her, life was a competition: who had the nicer house, the better connections, the bigger wedding, the more impressive partner. And for years, she believed she had won. What neither of them understood was that the real competition they thought they were winning didn't actually exist. Because the people worth impressing usually aren't watching. They're busy building their own lives. That's another lesson I wish more people understood earlier. The people who matter most in your life will never ask you to prove your worth to them. They don't measure your value through comparisons. They don't need you to compete for attention. And they definitely don't abandon you when you need help the most. Which brings me back to that airport. 2 a.m, cold rain, a nearly empty pickup lane. That moment was actually the most important part of the entire story. Not the investigation, not the arrests, not the wedding. Because when my sister left me standing there, she thought she was abandoning someone insignificant, someone beneath her, someone who would always stay behind. But what she really did was something much more important. She gave me clarity. Sometimes people reveal their true priorities in very simple moments. Not during dramatic arguments, not during major conflicts, just small choices. A phone call ignored, a promise broken, a ride home that never arrives. Those moments show you exactly where you stand in someone's life, and once you see that clearly, you have a choice. You can keep trying to earn a place in a story that doesn't include you, or you can start writing a different one. Walking away is harder than most people think, not because leaving is difficult, but because guilt has a way of following you. Family expectations, social pressure, the idea that you owe people endless patience just because you share the same last name. But there's something important you should know. Boundaries aren't betrayal, choosing peace isn't selfish, and protecting your own mental space isn't weakness, it's maturity. If someone constantly makes you feel like you're not enough, that relationship isn't strengthening you, it's draining you. And eventually, every person has to decide whether they want to keep living inside someone else's expectations or build a life that actually fits who they are. For me, that decision finally became clear the night of the wedding. Standing in that ballroom watching everything collapse around the people who had spent years judging my life, I realized something strange. I didn't feel angry, I didn't feel proud. I just felt finished. Finished explaining, finished proving, finished trying to earn respect from people who had already decided not to give it. And that feeling was far more powerful than revenge ever could be. Because revenge is temporary, peace is permanent. As the helicopter continued toward the lights of the next city, I thought about how many people spend years trapped in the wrong relationships simply because they believe leaving would make them the villain. But sometimes the bravest decision you can make isn't confronting someone, it's walking away. Walking away from toxic expectations, walking away from endless criticism, walking away from the idea that your value depends on someone else's approval. If there's one thing my story proves, it's this. The night my sister left me standing in the rain at the airport, she thought she was abandoning a failure. What she actually did was give me the reason I needed to finally walk away. And the moment you learn how to do that is the moment your real life finally begins.
Final note. This story is a work of fiction, but the valuable lessons we discuss are entirely real and continue to happen to many people every day. If this style isn't for you, that's perfectly okay. Please feel free to look for other content that better suits your needs.